The other thing is succession. And I think, okay, well, if I'm really committed to decentralization, I need a decentralized brain. If your innovation comes from a company or a founder, a really bright founder is writing papers or doing something, the problem is when they retire, die, or get compromised, or just they change their opinion on things, you could wake up and suddenly all of your intellectual capital evaporates. You know, we saw this with Bell Labs and other places. There are centers of excellence, and they were doing amazing work for a long time. And then culture changed, economic priorities changed, and suddenly they went from the thing that invented everything to the thing that invented nothing in a very short period of time. And there's a great book called The Idea Factory that talks a bit about that. So I realized, well, if we create a culture where we embed this and we decentralize and get many institutions involved and play the academic game where we get a lot of citations and we write good papers and this helps people's careers, they have a personal, individual incentive to participate and write and cite and so forth. And it becomes an endless well. And then suddenly you get zero knowledge papers and game theory papers and distributed systems papers and PL papers. That was one thing. The other thing is the love of formal methods, the other side of the equation, because you can write papers, but you can write it in Java. I mean, you can write papers, you can write Python. You don't have to be rigorous in the implementation. It came from looking at these things like airplanes or medical software, where the failure of the system results in death or the loss of billions of dollars. So it was incredibly important to me that you bring a team of engineers that have the ability to produce a chain of evidence in a very rigorous way that the implementation is semantically correct. It's pointless to write the paper if the code doesn't actually reflect the protocol in that respect. So it felt like a natural marriage of get formal methods engineers and really deep programmers and marry them with academics and put them together in some way, and then find a way to make that efficient. Now, that's been the bane of my existence as a CEO for the last 8 years. It's been very tough because you're taking two groups of people that historically do not work quickly, and you're trying to find a way, well, how do I make them work quickly, but also preserve the integrity of the process? The other thing is that they're not used to shipping products or consumer software. The tripartite structure is one side research, one side formal methods and good engineering, but then the third part is the customer. And both of those people, they're not usually used to talking to the customer in that respect. So it was a really challenging lift. How do you build a process where you can listen and you actually can get requirements? Like, for example, extended UTXO Plutus and the quest for determinism. This has been a holy war because a developer looks at determinism and says, that's a nice to have thing, except for the times it gets in my way.
Sure.
And a theoretician looks at that and they says, it's the most important thing in the world, and it's like virginity. The minute you lose it, it's gone forever. Okay, so we can never, that's a hill to die on. And so everything from how do you account for time in the system to a lot of the things that people would like to do to make the system more concurrent or efficient for something would require kind of violating that principle a bit. And so finding that balance between purity and the commercial reality of things, but keeping your integrity of the process has been really a difficult position to be in. But it's been worthwhile, and we've really accomplished a lot. And we've been prescient in that people are starting to come to Cardano and they say, they're not the first mover, they're the best mover, and they're the safest one. And in a time of scarcity, in a time of bareness, it's probably good to bet on the guys that know what they're doing. So I think the approach is finally starting to be vindicated, and people are starting to realize it's very important. But also, I think people are starting to realize that we need the approach for decentralization. It's absolutely required. There needs to be succession. There needs to be a new group of graduate students and postdocs and other people to come generation after generation and carry the torch and continue the research and work on things.